Okay, good evening. It's wonderful to be together. And I love the way we started our meeting tonight, our program, with such good news. Mazel tov to all of those who shared that wonderful news. We have a very special guest with us tonight, Avner Moriah. And as we said a few minutes ago, if you have spent any time at all in the Women's League Educational Pavilion at JTS, you've seen the beautiful framed artwork, and it was created by Avner. There are also pieces all over JTS that Avner has painted and created, and really it's an opportunity for us to connect with Avner. And he's been very generous with his artwork. It's a fundraiser for us. And so I am going to turn it right over to Grace Schessler, who is organizing the program and chairing it. And I want to thank Grace for all of her hard work. This did not just happen overnight. It took many months of coordination. And I thank you, Grace, for all you do as program chair of Women's League.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for your leadership, your friendship, and for including me in the planning of this special event. I'd also like to thank Rabbi Ellen Wollens-Fields for being with us tonight and for guiding this program with her usual integrity and patience. I am thrilled to share that Women's League has partnered with internationally renowned Israeli artist Avner Moriah to bring you, our members, an incredible evening of art. As Debbie said, many of you may already be familiar with Avner's work, as he is the artist who created the beautiful women's zodiac artwork in the Women's League Educational Pavilion classroom at JTS. So before I do my welcome directly to Mr. Moriah, I would like to just take a few moments to explain what you're about to see. In the following order, you will be introduced to Avner's works. After viewing a few of his early pieces, you will see works from his 8-year soldier period. Then come the historical themes, including the Holocaust series and the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. Next, you'll see his biblical projects, including the murals at JTS, the illustrated Haggadah, the Ganzen Megillah, which took him 17 years to create, the Women's Zodiac, and the Bible Project, which took Avner 15 years to create. Then we'll see the weekly portions, which, by the way, make beautiful gifts to commemorate a bar or bat mitzvah, bris, baby naming, or a wedding. And finally, Debbie's favorite, the Shir HaShirim collection, the Song of Songs, which is an anthology of illustrated love poems. So as you're listening and viewing, I invite you to write any questions you may have in the chat. We will be sure to leave enough time for questions and answers after Avner's presentation. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Avner Moriah to you. Mr. Moriah is an active artist and prolific painter whose creative career spans nearly 5 decades. Prior to turning his brush and focus to illuminating Hebrew scripture, Mr. Moriah created murals depicting biblical scenes, painting a range of series on Jewish and Israeli themes and history, and captured the landscapes of his native Jerusalem and Israel in a series of on-site paintings, like the one he sits in front of at this very moment. Mr. Moriah's works, which reflect on his roots in Western art, as well as the atmosphere and inspiration of the Middle East, can be found in the collections of major museums and libraries throughout the world, as well as private collections. I present to you Avner Moriah.
Good evening to all. I first want to thank the team that I worked with to arrange this evening and make it a success. My connection with JTS goes back more than 20 years when I started with my friendship with Gershon and Carol Kext. Gershon was the chairman of JTS for many, many years, and their home has many of my landscapes, but he always said to me, Wojciech, it's time that you do something for the Jewish people. I didn't know what he meant at the time, but between Carol and Gershon, I got the two commissions that started my journey into the Jewish text. That was in the beginning of the, it was in the end of 99 and beginning of 2000. It actually, what happened was that what uh, moved me into my studio was the illness of my wife. She had leukemia, and so up to that point, I painted outdoors, the landscapes, and in order for me to take care of her while she was sick, I started to work on the themes of the women's zodiac and the Ma'amad al Sinai, the gathering at Mount Sinai. Uh, the gathering at Mount Sinai, what motivated the theme was the fact that it was on the wall leading to the library, and so I thought of scenes where we go up and down in the mount, up and down in the Bible, and also I thought of the fact that we got our written word in House Sinai, and actually the view that you see in back of me is a landscape that I painted on site in Sinai of Mount Santa Caterina, or how we call it also House Sinai. It actually has I have a little sweet story to tell about painting there, because when I painted that painting, it was already under the rule of Egypt, and there was an Egyptian officer that manned the entrance to where I actually wanted to paint from. And so I asked permission, and he let me in to the site where I put my easel and worked. And after 5 days, he decided he wanted bakshish. So what happened was that the Bedouins that saw me paint came to him and said, leave him alone, he's a good painter. So that shows you something about human interaction in the Middle East. For over 20 years, I painted the Israeli landscape, but in my early career, I studied in Bezalel, and then I moved to the US. And while I studied at Yale, I was the first Israeli student that was selected to study the MFA program at Yale. And so I studied a series of Israeli soldiers in the landscape, thinking how different my background and my upbringing is compared to American young artists. It took me about 8 years to clean my soul from my military experience. And from that series, I have paintings in the Jewish Museum, the Metropolitan Museum, and many other institutes and private collections. After finishing the series on the soldiers in the landscape, and also about every year I changed a little bit the theme, how I worked. This was one of my early works, the one that is on site now, when I was actually a student first year at Yale. These are soldiers running at night. The paintings that you see right now that are on the screen are a collection of my works. The first two paintings that you saw before were actually the very early beginning of my painting. And this painting that you see right now is the first one that I did while I was a student at Yale first year. You want to move next? Grace. This painting here is a mural. I call it the Informer, and this is from my military experience. Actually, when you think about it, not much has changed since the days that I served in the Israeli army, with a conflict between military and civilians. The guy with the hood is the informer, and the guys next to the wall are suspected terrorists. Okay. Next. This is also, it's a scene of a cafe arrest, and actually I used an image from Edward Hopper of a cafe in the States, and I just added my soldiers into the scenery, thinking to myself that violence can happen anywhere at any time. And so not much later, when I painted this painting in 1985, and as we all know, 20 years later, we had the incidents of the Twin Towers in the States. So none of us are immune from violence. Next. This is a painting that from the series I have, a painting in the Metropolitan Museum. What I did here, I did the soldiers marching through an olive grove, and juxtapositioned are the olive trees, with the idea of the olive being a tree for peace, and the eerie atmosphere feeling of them marching through the hills. Next. This is a series also of soldiers that I did after touring Italy and looking at Renaissance art, with the idea of having multiple images on one canvas. It's a series of arrests in a village. And as you very well know, the issues and the moral issues that go with our military presence in the West Bank and the complexity of it, that was something that I tried to deal with as life goes on and violence is around. The two kids in the center are actually my two children sitting on steps while we were touring the south of the United States, near Mobile, the south coast of Mobile, Alabama. So I just added it in. Next. This is a big series that I did after watching the movie Shoah. I saw it twice in 2 weeks, and of Claude Lanzmann it was in 1987, and I said I had to do something about it. And my idea was not to imitate any of the photographs, because I wasn't in it, or any of my immediate family did not lose their life in the Holocaust, but I wanted to create a world of hell. So I call this the killing wall. Next. This painting I call the chimney. Also, you can see the spirits go up into the heavens, and the dying below, and the German Wehrmacht marching on the side. When I did these paintings, I was also influenced by the Spanish painters in Mexico. I call this the wedding between us and the Germans. Obviously, we're always going to be connected through this horrific experience. My idea when I did these Holocaust paintings, I painted them with bright colors because at the time in the mid 80s, the Holocaust wasn't such a popular subject matter. It was still a time where the survivors did not want to speak about it. Only later that it started to spring these Holocaust museums throughout the US. This is a series that I did on the expulsion of the Jews from Spain for 1992, and I call it Looting the Synagogue because you see just around the time of 1492, a big surge in the cathedrals in Spain, and I thought that a lot of it had to do with Jewish confiscated properties and also the conversos that stayed in Spain. The Catholic Church probably told them, now show us that you're a good Catholic. So this is a image of God looking at the bishop converting the Jews, and even he is disgusted by what he sees. Next. For 20 years, I painted the Israeli landscape on site, and you will see that it went through several changes. This is a road leading into the Judean desert. This is a view of the Sea of Galilee, sunset with the Khamsin, where the the hot weather. This is a sunrise over the Sea of Galilee. Now, these are large canvases. I had a truck and a portable studio with a huge easel and a huge umbrella to protect me from the sun. And I used to anchor my easel with the rocks so it won't fly when the wind hit the working outdoors. This is a view from of the old city from the north west corner of the old city. This is a view of women's zodiac. Okay, so these are some of the images from the murals that I did for Women's League. When I was offered to do the commission, they said, do anything you want. And I thought, since I'm doing something about women, I picked 12 women, either biblical or from Midrash. And I added, the idea was the lunar cycle. So I added also an image of the zodiac sign. And there's also a text below. And in the corners, you see fruits that ripe around the time of these, the different images that I have. This painting, and I think the one after it, was gifts of mine to Women's League with the idea that it's not only them paying me for the work, but I did something for them too. One was about Chava, the mother of all mankind, and this is the four mothers with a well in the middle as a symbol of fertility, and a zodiac based on the Jewish holidays. Next. This is a mural that I did in JTS. It was next to the library. As I said, the idea was going up and down since it was on the staircase, I thought of Ma'amad al-Sinai, the gathering at Mount Sinai, because Moses goes up and down the mountain 4 times. And I thought also that this is where we got the written word from God, the 10 Commandments. I thought also of the 10 rabbis that were executed by the Romans as a part of the learning of the Torah and the Midrash. And also I picked 10 different Midrashim about the gathering at Mount Sinai, the 10 commandments, and the 10 plagues. So each square has one of these ideas in it. And the centerpiece, this is my Passover Haggadah that I have. The uniqueness of my Haggadah is that the images and the text coincide. So like this is the 10 plagues. The image that I have is a randel about the 10 plagues. This came, the project of the Passover Haggadah was actually the first Hebrew text that I illustrated. This is Adirhu, that Jerusalem is the center of the universe. What you're seeing right now is images from my scroll of Esther. This is version number 2. The length is 28 meters long, and they created a special category for me because they thought it was so beautiful. And so I always say, I'm very dyslexic, but my mother always said, Avner, don't worry, I think you're doing well. And then when the Guinness committee created a special record for me, I thought, gee, they think like my mother. This is the project that I worked on, the Chumash. It took me 15 years. And again, what I did here, my Chumash is unique. There isn't another one that was done like that. Next to each text, there is an image, and I built a visual language. Genesis and Exodus have stories, but the stories behind them have a purpose. There are rules or morals behind it. And the images that I picked up in the first two books I use later on, because when you think of the Chumash, most of it is not stories. Most of it are rules that we see throughout the text. This is the sacrifice of Isaac, and what interested me here was the lie, because Abraham lies to Isaac when he asks him, where is the calf for this sacrifice? And Moses and Abraham says, God will provide, but he doesn't tell him he's going to provide him. This is an image of Joseph in the pit, and the same motifs that you saw in the gathering at the sacrifice of Isaac are here. There is a lie, because when Jacob asks the sons, where was Joseph eaten by an animal? They say yes, so they lie to him. They sacrifice. Can you just hold a second before you? They sacrifice a goat for the blood to put on the coat of many colors. And in both cases, there are strangers. In the story of Joseph, there are the Midianim, and the story of Jacob of Isaac are the youth that are left behind. This is an image of the Jacob's ladder. Next. This is an image of Dinah's rape. This is an image of Joseph ruling Egypt. And if you look at the little square in the middle of the left corner, you could see that Joseph was managing running the Egyptian economy before the famine, and so I gave him a cellular phone and a computer to do the calculations. In all my projects, I always put a little bit of humor in it, but I don't look at it as a comics book, but a serious work of art. This is the book of Exodus, and here the first page, I compared the women that saved us from Pharaoh and protected the newborns, and I compared it to Queen Esther that also saved the Jewish people. So in the two stories, you see that the women are the ones that save us. Can you go back for a second to the image? What I did here, the other side, I compared between the story of Joseph that turns to his ministers and says to them that Joseph was sent to them by God. So I understand it as if Pharaoh believed in God, where Moses, the Pharaoh at the time, thought of himself as God himself. So the dark image behind Pharaoh is actually the image of the god Ra, that was the god of the sun. Next. This is the image of the burning bush, and the way I see it, when God sent Moses to Yitro, Yitro gave him the flock of sheep, and Moses passed every day the burning bush. But only when he was ready, he actually saw the bush being on fire. And if you know, the image of JTS is the burning bush. So that's my interpretation on the burning bush. Here I compared between the angel that saved Isaac and the angel that killed the firstborn in Egypt. Next. The image on the bottom right in the story, and they said that the heart of Pharaoh was heavier than Vayichbad lev Paro. And so I took an image from the Book of the Dead of Egyptian hieroglyphs, where they would weigh the heart of somebody that died. And if it was heavier than a feather, it would not go into the underworld. This image here of crossing the Red Sea, I thought the crossing of the Red Sea in Egyptian art, I compared the crossing of the Red Sea to a tale from Mesopotamia. When the Israelites come out of the Red Sea, they sing a song to thank God, and they're going to build him a temple. Okay, they haven't been yet to Mount Sinai and already singing songs to God. So I looked at a tale in Mesopotamia about Marduk and Tiamat, and there the Tiamat, which was the mother of Marduk, she was going to kill all the lesser gods. So they come to Marduk, which was Tiamat's son, and they asked him to save them. So Tiamat has 7 heads. So he brings her to a stream to drink water, and when she opens her mouth, he puts a dagger in it and kills her. So the lesser gods are so pleased that he saved their lives, they build him the city of Babel and bring mankind to worship him. So it's not the same story, but there are some kinds of similarities between the two stories. Next. This is an image of the Israelites being carried by Nesher, eagle, to Mount Sinai. This is the gathering at Mount Sinai, and on the right, that's the Ten Commandments. Next. This is an interesting case. You know, with the golden calf, the women give their jewelry actually to create the golden calf. So they give their belongings to create an image. Now, when they built the tools of the temple, they actually give their mirrors away, and with the copper from the mirrors, they create a tool for purity. So when you think about it, actually in the Metropolitan, there are mirrors from the Egyptian period. And when you think about it, they actually give away their image to create a tool for purity, and with the idea that God has no image. So I played on the juxtaposition. The book of Leviticus, everybody said, what are you going to do with Leviticus? What are you going to do with Leviticus? So I thought of rules that it's not black and white, they're in the gray area. So for example, in the bottom image, I have the wood that Isaac carried on his back for his sacrifice to the wood that they used on the altar in the temple. Again, I played with the image of the sacrifice of Noach. Noach actually is the first one that sacrifices to God, and I compared it to the sacrifice of Isaac. Here, again, on the right-hand side, I have images of sacrifice in the text, and I compared it to a mural of sacrifices in Egypt. This I call the menu. These are all the animals that we're not allowed to eat. So I put them all on one panel. And these are, again, images. What I did, next to each image that you see here, I actually have a companion book for each book, and it says from which verse it comes from. And if I have some kind of a comparison to another biblical text, I put it in there. Again, these are multiple images of rules that were mentioned in Leviticus. This is an interesting panel, because here I created an image of God putting Adam in the Garden of Eden to protect the garden. I have Bezat Apecha Tochalachem once we get kicked out of the garden. And also, the one thing that God gives us when we're in the garden is, when we leave the garden, is our clothing, and I look at it as a sign of dignity. And the first time a house is mentioned in the Bible, it's the inside of the ark that Noach paints it. So that's the bottom left corner. This is the end of Leviticus. I compared between leaving Egypt and God threatening the Jews that if they misbehave, he will send them back to Egypt. Next. This is the book of Bamidbar in the desert. This is an image of the tabernacle. Next. These are just images from the book of Numbers. Next. Next. You know, in Genesis, they say that actually Adam and Eve hid inside a tree. So I compared it to the idea when a husband accuses his wife of cheating, and she becomes pregnant, and I compared between the two stories. Next. The image in the lower left corner is when somebody decides to break up his vow so he can have his haircut. So I have a guy getting a haircut in a portable barbershop in the desert. And this is just, I compare different kinds of sacrifices. These are the Meraglim that went to the land of Canaan to see what is happening there, and the story of the giants that were there. Next. Again, these are images that I took from either Mesopotamia or Egypt. Next. What I want to tell you that for each image that you see here, I have preliminary studies, hundreds of them that I did, and then I selected the ones that I actually used for the text. This is the red heifer. Next. Here I compared the two animals that talk in the Bible. One is the snake in the Garden of Eden, and the other one is a mule with Balak. Next. And Bilam. This is the last book, Dvarim. What I decided to do here, each book has its own kind of feeling. Here, I connected the images more together. So it's a more gentle kind of approach. Next. 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 Here again, there's some about, again, you can move on. This is Ha'azinu. So I created an image of a microphone. For each parasha, I have a different kind of an image to start it. This is the end of my Sefer Deuteronomy, where I actually have Moses standing and looking at the land of Canaan, but he can't get in there. Next. This is my Shir Hashirim book. What triggered me in Shir Hashirim is the fact that God is not mentioned in it. So my thought was that if he would have been mentioned, uh, I doubt it if anybody would have taken him out from the text. And since he's not mentioned, you see similar songs that were sung by women throughout the Mediterranean basin. And so I went and looked at images throughout the region of different uh, structures, and we'll go through them. This one, for example, has Indian influences. Uh, Another image from the Book of Songs. When we look at animals that are mentioned in the book, animals serve several purposes. One is like gods. The other one is, they lived among the people. It wasn't like today you have to go to a petting zoo. And also they created from them tools for worship, but they also both ate them and sacrificed them. Next. Next. Again, the image of a snake, like we have in Genesis, comparing a woman to a snake. Uh, Actually, when the women at the time, you see that they dealt with the issue of fertility, the issue of giving birth, and the whole concept of how come the women are the ones that give birth altogether, which they didn't have answers. So the idea of the snake, for example, is one, because they shed their skin, and also because they are like tricky. So this is an image from Mesopotamia. Next. The first images of women you see from prehistoric time and throughout the whole region. Next. Again, this is a tool of worship with the head of a goat. Next. On the left-hand side, you see paradise. The word paradise comes from Persia. Next. So again, I'm comparing images and I'm making up images for the songs. Now each image, I have a companion book that explains the images from. There is this series now on American TV, The White Lotus. The idea of the lotus is a fruit of fertility, and it goes all the way back to Egypt. They used it as an aphrodisiac. Next. Here I took an image of a female goddess from Saudi Arabia. On the left-hand side, you see a woman that is coming out of the desert. Next. Here I compared a shepherd, a Mesopotamian shepherd. He also has the lotus in his hands, and this is also a love song between two shepherds. Next. This is an image of a fertility goddess from the land of Canaan, and on the left, the image of winemaking and lovers from where I mixed both images from Indian miniatures and Egyptian wall reliefs. Next. Again, images of a fertility goddess in Egypt and lovers from India. Next. This image I took the lovers from a Japanese love scene. and on the right, an image from a Greek goddess holding a goat. Next. Again, fertility from grapevines, and an image of the shcharchoret, the black one from Egypt. Next. And this is an image again of a fertility scene on the right-hand side. This is from Mesopotamia, and this is the king bringing his lover to his room. Next. Okay. What I've created here, and this is a byproduct from my Chumash, I picked 54 images of parashot, both with the Hebrew and the English text. And as Grace mentioned, they are good. You could use them for bar and bat mitzvah, or wedding gifts, or any kind of gift that you want. Next. Next. This is Enoch walking with God. Next. This is Noach and the rainbow. Next. This is the flood, Noah's flood. Next. This is Isaac again, the image of Isaac and Abraham, the sacrifice of that. Next. Rachel in the well and Eliezer drinking water from the well. Next. Jacob's ladder, Moses at the burning bush. The daughter of Pharaoh finding Moses on the Nile. That we became as many as the stars at night in Egypt. We saw that image before. So I really did for each weekly portion an image that would relate. The gathering at Mount Sinai. You could go faster here. We don't have to show every one of them. Next. Okay, that's the most important part. So, what you actually saw in the last, what is it, like 45 minutes is really a body of almost 5 decades of my work. And as you can tell, I really dedicated my talent and my life to Jewish subject and Israel, which are close to my heart. And I thought I would use my talent really for our people. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer you.
I also think we're a small enough group that if you wanted to unmute yourself, if they have that control to unmute themselves, that you could. I think it's so important for you all to know that Avner is a secular Jew who really learned as he created, which I think is so amazing. You want to say how you feel about that, Avner, because you're very articulate about that.
Yeah. My grandparents from both sides came from ultra-Orthodox homes. From my mother's side, when they came to Palestine at the time, they came as Zionists, so they left their religion in the back, not counting on the Messiah to rescue them, but they believed in the Zionist movement, which the idea behind it was that they will take their fate in their own hands. From my father's side, they came from Germany, and they stayed Orthodox all their life. My two parents were secular; they had no interest in their being practicing Jews. So in a way, it's kind of interesting how I went a full cycle on being really not interested in my religious heritage, and I think the fact that I was exposed to the beauty of Jewish life in America is what led me actually to dedicate my last 20 years to the Jewish text. And as I say, the one person that really encouraged me to do something about it was Gershon Keks, who was the chairman of the board of the JTS. He always would invite me to Friday night dinners, so, and the holidays when I was in the States. And so I saw and from time to time, he actually got me to go with him to shul on Friday night or Shabbat. So I saw the beauty of the community and the Jewish life. And I realized that if you do want to stay connected to your religion, you have to be part of a community. So in a way, it made me, and throughout the years that I've been selling my art in the States, my fellow Jews always opened their hearts and support for me to do what I have done for the last almost 50 years.
So, Avner, Women's League cannot thank you enough for being with us tonight. You have been so generous by offering our members a special discount code, which I know that it's in the chat. Karen put it in the chat, WL 2022. Each of us now has an opportunity to own a signed Avner Moriah print at a 20% savings off. That is the entire website, avnermoriahprints.com. But your generosity goes further because you have now, this is a fundraiser, as Debbie said, you have generously agreed to donate a portion of your proceeds back to WLCJ. So
I didn't agree, I suggested.
That-
Better.
that's right.
That is nicer.
Yes, this is what it's like to work with Avner. It's so wonderful.
The truth. Debbie, isn't that the truth?
Absolutely, Avner, absolutely.
Debbie and Rabbi have been to Avner's studio in Israel.
I was just going to talk about that if you let me, Grace, for a second. So when Rabbi and I were in Israel in February, we had the opportunity to go to Avner's studio. He came and picked us up and drove us there and then brought us back. And we thought we would spend an hour. Let me just say that 4 hours later, Rabbi and I were struggling to keep our eyes open because his studio is filled with art, beautiful, beautiful art. We were fortunate enough to see the Megillah and the Haggadah, and it was really an opportunity to see it in living color. You can't really understand how beautiful it is when you see it on Zoom like this. So I would suggest that everyone go to the website and look at the artwork, blow it up on your computer, take a look at it. It's really, it's just so beautiful, and you can't see the beauty of it on Zoom like this. The other thing I wanted to say is that Avner's suggestion was if you want to buy one portion, one parsha of the Torah for a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah project, a gift for that young person during their portion, their pasha, it's a very appropriate bat mitzvah gift, and it's a beautiful idea. Avner, I don't know if you wanted to address that or talk about that, giving that as a gift.
I mean, there is an option of also putting, printing dedication on the actual print. It increases the cost a little bit, but it's possible. And I also want to offer to any one of you, once you look at my site, if you have any questions after this evening, I'll be happy to answer each one of you individually, by mail or by any other way.
So these prints are signed, as we said, and this discount code offer will stay open at least through the end of the year. So if you have Hanukkah gifts to purchase, or you think that you deserve a gift, which I'm sure that each of you does deserve a gift. So you have some time to really go through it at your leisure, because there's a lot to see on there. So
If you have a grandchild or a child or a niece or a nephew having a bar bat mitzvah, it makes a wonderful gift. A wedding gift. Some of the pictures in Shir HaShirim are beautiful lovers. If you'd like to give that as a wedding gift, I think there are many, many opportunities for a gift for yourself or as well as your family.
Rabbi.
So I just wanted to thank Avner and also just say that when we met with him, we saw all of his artwork. But of course, I also looked at all the books that he has, because he's like, all of his artwork is based on some sort of midrash, rabbinic legend. So I feel like he's almost like a walking midrash, a walking rabbinic legend of, like, you know, we have written midrashim. This is an artistic midrash of explaining it, and it's his artwork is a type of thing. I've seen a lot of them, but each time I look at it, I see something different in your picture. So it's magnificent and incredible. And I have to say, I'm going to go to some of the places that you've said where your artwork hangs, because I've seen it in my office and I've seen it at JTS, but I have to go to the Metropolitan now to see it. And also your work is in the Library of Congress.
Yeah.
So maybe the next time I'm in DC.
I'm totally dyslexic. So for me, to actually end up in these most prestigious libraries around the world is kind of it's ironic that I found a way to get into them through the chimney and not through the front door, because I really created my own visual language, and at the highest level that one can create it, and end up in these most prestigious libraries throughout the world. For example, my Chumash, the book is in the three libraries: the Library of Congress, the French National Library, and the British National Library. And these libraries also host the first Bible that was done by the Gutenberg Bible. And so, you know, to have something that is contemporary like mine on a shelf next to this major work of art says something about the quality of my work. So in a way, you know, I found a way to overcome my disability, which makes me feel good.
Amazing. Does anybody have any other questions for Avner?
There's a question by Vivian in the chat. She wants to know, where at the Met can we find your work? Do you know where it is, Avner, in the Met?
In the basement. But they have a lot of it.
Oh, okay. We'll have to go through every tower.
They have my Bible there, my Passover Haggadah, and also images of my landscapes and my war scenes. And actually, I was 36 years old when they purchased my paintings. So my ego has been taken care of at a very young age.
Janie?
I just want to commend you because overcoming a disability is an enormous accomplishment. And for you to turn it into such beautiful art is really commendable. So, Yasher Koach.
Thank you. And I think, you know, like today I taught in Ramaz. I love to teach, to share my skill and knowledge with young people and to show them, you know, I spent in two different schools with kids with learning disabilities, to give them the idea that in the end of the day, it's up to them not to be intimidated by the rules of society, what is the right way of achieving, and not to be, and to find the inner strength to overcome their disability. You know, I don't look at it as a disability. In the end of the day, it was my strength, but you know.
Grace,
Rabbi?
there's another question, Grace.
Are there New York City galleries that show your work currently?
I sell my work word of mouth. Um, I haven't sold through galleries in many years, but I have many homes in the city that have my art.
And I was just wondering,
Anybody wants to see my art when I'm in the States, I have a whole bunch of works in my studio on the Upper West Side, and that could be arranged by special viewing.
Sorry, Rabbi.
I was just wondering when Debbie and I were in your studio in Israel, you were working on a few things. I was wondering what your status was and what you're working on now.
I think at the time I was doing Shir Hashirim and also working on my Scroll of Esther, which I actually completed, and I'm going to submit it for another record. That I already hold a record for the longest Scroll of Esther, and I'm submitting it for the biggest Scroll of Esther. My scroll is 34 meters long. 34 meters long means that it's 11-story tall building, which is tall. You need an elevator.
Avner, how did you first start doing art? And in which media? From Judith Meyer asked.
I was always creative and a troublemaker in high school and elementary school, but really to study when I finished my military service at the age of 22, and at that point I didn't know which way I'm going to go because of the learning disabilities. And I always said, if I get better, I'll keep on doing it. Obviously, I haven't stopped till today. And so over the years, I always look at it as a way of giving back to my people. And also, I'm a product of the Yom Kippur War. So for me, it was a way of thinking, I guess there's a reason why I'm here, to keep on doing my work.
Was it in media? Was it always oils? You started painting?
No, it varied over the years from what I started with oils, but I also did watercolors and gouache, and the works on paper that I showed this evening, they're all a combination of watercolors and gouache mixed together. And Debbie and the Rabbi saw I use brushes with 4 hairs on it, so it's like really like weaving almost. And when you see my historical themes on my landscapes, I use much larger brushes as I work. So, it's kind of an interesting way to see how I can control my temperament.
Okay. We have another question. What did you work on when you were at Yale?
My soldier series. I actually have a funny story to tell. When I the year before I got into Yale, I came to visit the school, and when I signed in to get into Yale, there was a Palestinian feminist professor there, and I submitted my soldier paintings, and sure enough, she made sure that I wouldn't pass the committee, the admissions committee. At Yale, there's about 1,200 applicants every year, and they pick 20. And so the following year, there was somebody from the faculty of art that actually went to Israel and they said, submit your work again. And at that time, this professor was on a sabbatical. So she didn't interfere in me getting in, but she came in my second year. When the MFA program is a 2-year period. So she came to obviously when she was there, I didn't study with her because I thought nothing good is going to come from a feminist Palestinian woman from East Jerusalem. And at my final crit, she blasted at me. And I kind of suspected that that was going to happen. So in a very unusual way for an Israeli, I kept my mouth shut. And afterwards, the faculty came to me and thanked me that I did so because I wouldn't let her turn it into a political argument. And she was up for tenure, but she didn't get it. So in a way, it kind of felt good.
That's called karma.
That's right.
Okay. I think that's the end of our Q&A unless anybody else has anything else they'd like to say. So enjoy the website.
Enjoy the weather.
Well, thank you again, Avner. It's been a real privilege to bring this program to Women's League, and that allowed me to get to know you. So thank you so much.
I really want to thank the committee for their hard work and getting to know each other and making friends over, I would say, a year's period of planning and making it to fruition to see this evening today, how everybody did whatever they could in order to make it happen. So I really want to thank the 5 of you for putting it all together.
A pleasure. An honor and a pleasure. So spread the word to your other sisters in Women's League. Share the links and enjoy shopping.
Bye-bye.